ensure that peace and harmony return to Nigeria if elected president. Let's hear him.
God will give you albarka. I will give your family peace and harmony. I will serve you. Serve Nigeria. I kept my promise. Always. Today, I've come home to Kano. All I want to do is dance. I want music.
The All Progressives Congress Presidential Campaign Council has begun sensitization of members across the 21 local government areas of Adamawa State on the need to get their permanent voter cards PVCs ahead of this year's general election. The Vice Chairman of the APC Presidential Campaign Council for the Northeast, Dahiru Haman Diko, explained that the rationale behind the exercise is to reach out to voters at the grassroots on the need to get their PVCs in readiness for the polls. Diko said the team will not leave any stone unturned to win the zone for its presidential candidate, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, in the Northeast state. The PVC Vice Chairman in the Northeast and some APC chieftains.
The purpose of calling this meeting, I call the members of this committee of Kotaka Mobilization Adamawa State Chapter to tell them our mission and vision, our responsibility, what we're supposed to do in the state in regard to contact our agri members and to mobilize people in regards to 2022 election of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu and Senator Kashim Shettima. Alhamdulillah, we have spoken to the land and have all agreed to work for Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu and Senator Kashim Shettima to win this election by 25th February by the grace of God. So I'm calling our members, even those that are not our members, to go and collect their PVCs, because we have a lot of PVCs laying in the INEC office. I'm calling our members, and those are not our members, please, they should go and collect their PVCs. This is what will make them to vote for our candidate, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
To put the ball rolling, we don't want to be left behind as the committee. So the deputy director of that committee, who happens to be an indigenous of Adamawa, he came with some items discussed in their main committee for us to discuss over it in the state as well. So as we have gone through item by item, identify the areas that we can form some subcommittees that can give us a positive result during our election. So alhamdulillah.
What we know is that there's no party that is known in Nigeria apart from APC. APC is the only party we know. So we have been mobilizing people from the grassroots to see that Ahmed Bola Tinubu wins the presidential election come 2023. There's that assurance because we have not been sleeping and we continue to mobilize from the grassroots until the day that we vote. And for sure, Tinubu will win.
Also ahead of the 2023 presidential election, governors of Bayelsa and Edo states have visited their Delta State counterpart and the vice presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Ifeanyi Okowa. the governors appeal to the German elections.
For us, we want a united PDP. And at all times when we meet, we always focus on the unity of the party. And we are not foreclosing speaking to our brothers. Even today, we've talked about that, and we are still calling on our brothers to be part of their own party and work in unity with every other person.
A new year, and at this time, we're supposed to go around felicitating as family, to wish each other well, and pray together, and hope that the new year brings good tidings. So we're here today to visit with our brother, and by the grace of God, our next Vice President, to wish him good tidings, wish him well.
All right, let's take a short break, and when we return, it will be time to speak with the public affairs analyst, Niyi Akinsiju, on former President Olusegun Obasanjo's endorsement of the presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi. Please stay with us.
It's always a great morning on the TVC Breakfast Show.
Thanks for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
With the array of story government.
Once it's generated, you don't use it, it's waste.
We are not even sure whether we have a strategy for security.
Are you saying that there was nothing wrong in that?
Was he the one driving the taxi?
Answer the question.
Reveal your morning with all you need to know.
Like
Yes, just mundane lyrics.
Yes.
How does that fit into your scheme of events or duties right now?
No chief of staff, no general has the right to call a governor to order. The governor has been elected by his people.
Start your day right, because this is the breakfast show that adds to your breakfast. TVC Breakfast, weekdays at 7 a.m., only on TVC News.
Welcome back. You're still watching Politics Tonight, digging beyond the headlines. And now to our interview with the first guest of the day. I am now joined by a public affairs analyst, Niyi Akinsiju. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for the privilege.
All right. You know, the highly anticipated 2023 is here, and of course, it is a very decisive one for us as Nigerians. Atmosphere.
Oh, well, it's typical of the transition period. Over the last 3 months thereabouts, since the lifting of the ban on electoral activities, there have been a lot of excitement around town. There have been a lot of conjectures that usually characterizes the election period, as it were, and the fanfare that also followed candidates of the parties around states, capitals, and other cities that they had visited on campaigns. And of course, the media had also had a great time covering political activities. And of course, there had also been exchanges of verbal fires, emotional engagements and all that. So it's a good time to be a Nigerian, because again, this is truly a manifestation of what democracy is all about, where people, the ordinary people, also now become how do I call it now, the masters, as being chief recruiting officers for our political leadership.
All right, so let's also quickly touch on INEC's preparation. From your point of view, how would you rate it so far?
I think generally, since 1999, there's a feel of confidence across the political divides, such that we are going into this election, one, with optimism to the fact that votes would count, with optimism to the fact of clarity in the processes, and of course with optimism to the fact that the outcome of the elections, will be credible.
And then, campaign rallies from all of the political parties now and their major candidates, what would you pick as the key factor that has shaped the campaign so far?
Well, I am rather disappointed because how individual candidates wants to engage the economy, wants to engage the security, the national security, wants to enhance human capital development. You know, how do we ensure macroeconomy? So that it's a manifesto of respective political candidates, especially at the presidential level, that should have been the engagement, that should have been the major dominant reference in the environment. But I have seen less of that. I have seen more of brickbats. And I think we should elevate beyond that so that at every point in time, the average Nigerian would understand the issues and, of course, be taken away from the emotive matters that had always tainted politics. Emotive matters of tribe, ethnicity, of religion, you know, and of course, perhaps of who has more money. So that as we have grown with this over this past 22 years, I am believing that it's time that Nigerians would be able to be involved independently and objective, you know, going into an election, understanding the major issue, understanding the characters of the candidates, and of course, making a determination of their choices and their choices and outcomes of who to vote to around those issues.
All right, going by how disappointed you are, how do you think we can entrench that in this election circle and beyond, or rather, is it too late for us?
Yeah, well, we will continue to, especially at the level of the media, the mainstream media. If it's possible for the mainstream media to focus on issues, perhaps it will trickle down to the social media where individuals have their own corner, want to have their own pieces of communication. So I would continue to appeal, to the major mainstream media outfits and outlets to make this the issue. Continue to engage the candidates on their capacity, on what they want to do, throw up how the process and the how of what they want to achieve, because it's not just enough. What you see around are definition of challenges and problems, and we have been doing that since 1960. Can we have people that can talk to issues and how we are going to resolve this? We are going to resolve the challenges in very clear person down there at the level, at the bottom of the pyramid, the structure of our society. We understand clearly what the candidates are trying to communicate.
All right, let's get to, one of the most important discussions for today. Former President Obasanjo stirred the hornet's nest by openly endorsing the presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi. What is your view on that?
As a Nigerian, I sincerely believe that it is within the right of General Olusegun Obasanjo to profess, to declare his preference as an ordinary Nigerian. But again, I don't think he's an ordinary Nigerian. He has been a two-time head of state of this country, and to the extent that he has the grace, of managing this country. I am thinking because there's also a class of former head of states in this country that had also taken a neutral, objective position by sitting back and, of course, enjoying the courtesies of engagement by all political parties, as it were. So, to that extent, I think he is in breach of public trust. When he does that, he had managed that office before. And in the like of others that had managed the office before, he is supposed to be seen as an elder statesman. And as an elder statesman, he's supposed to be seen as neutral. And as being neutral, he's supposed to be seen to be all-embracing of all dimensions and branches of the political class, as it were. So to that extent, I think it's not appropriate for him to come to the arena But yes, he has a right truly to say, this is my preference. However, where I also feel there's a deficiency is the fact that he now tried to also position himself as a major achiever and therefore an icon, more or less, in the Nigerian political firmament to determine, the kind of characterization of leadership that we assume, or rather that he assumes that it fulfills, in terms of the quality and the extent of capability a leader, a presidential candidate should have. And I am saying that he could have declared or he could have endorsed Mr. Peter Obi without anybody. I wouldn't have even have referenced it to that just been a passing statement as far as I'm concerned. But I feel concerned that Obasanjo will now start pontificating on who is appropriate, to be the president of this country, and of course trying to claim the fact that he has experience and he has been able to deliver on the purposes and the direction of good governance when he was in government. And I am saying no. Some of us followed him and had been followed him and are critical. I've been able to are critical of his achievement. I am claiming, and the facts and figures are there, to show that the Obasanjo administration between 1999 and 2007 was a massive failure and does not compare to even the successors that he had, since he left office in 2007. I cannot see any major accomplishment of that administration to point to. And I keep challenging people who perhaps are also his followers to point me to one accomplishment, either in terms of physical infrastructure or policy engagement that were appropriately conceived, appropriately implemented, and appropriately crystallized, because it's not enough to conceive an idea or to conceive a policy. It is not enough to start to commence the process of the implementation of that policy. It is important that the intent and objectives of that policy should be crystallized. That is the end, just the exit point for any policy impact. So can somebody point me to that? I have not been able to see any. Now, if I can quickly make certain observation, for instance, between 1999 and 2007, Nigeria, first, Obasanjo inherited a very small Nigerian population. In 2006, we were 140 million, compared to what we have now, more than 200 million. Now, at 140 million, in 2004, 2003, between 2003 and 2004, when the National Living Standard Study Survey, was conducted, more than 64% of that 140 million Nigerians were living in abject poverty. That was the outcome of that survey. Now, the unfortunate thing, when you now compare and contrast the kind of resources that are available, to that government, simple calculation shows that the government had more than $200 billion with that small, relatively small population.
Mr. Akinsiju, some analysts will continue to give him credit, especially because he took over from a military government, a military administration.
It was not the author of the democratic struggle that led to the military exiting. We know the authors, we know the activists, we know those who championed the efforts. In fact, at a point in time, General Olusegun Obasanjo was more or less on the sideline, except the fact that he wrote a letter during the Abacha period, and he was jailed as being a coup plotter. But we know those who were very, very active. I know, for instance, that Asiwaju Ahmed Bola Tinubu was a very active participant in that struggle. I know that Dr. Ghana, Jerry Ghana, was an active participant. I know that Dr. Ekweme, former vice president of this country, was an active participant. We have so many of them.
Mr. Akinsiju, at this moment, allow me to say that we're not talking about a democratic struggle, but then having achieved the little you say he achieved, don't you think he deserves some credit?
Please, can you just ask, can somebody point me to what he achieved so we can appropriately put it in context? The context of resources available, the context of crystallization, as I said, the context of crystallization of that policy. Is it appropriate that you had so much and you have about 90 million Nigerians living under the poverty line in a number of 140 million Nigerians? Is it appropriate for someone who believes that he has been able to deliver on capacity and, of course, on capability to address the challenges of this country? That is one. Then two, is it also appropriate for someone who, under whose watch, most companies shut down? In fact, Dunlop and Michelin, Perrier, one of those tire producing manufacturing companies, fled Nigeria between 2001 and 2007. So, and I also make a reference to the fact that at no point in time since 1999 had we experienced the highest form of inflation rates in this country, except during the Obasanjo years, when in August 2005, inflation rate skyrocketed to 28.2%. It had never happened before. So when it's claimed to leadership, when it's claimed to competence is orchestrated, some of us would want to wait and say we need to question this, we need to critique this, and that is why I, as much as possible, I am saying I am not bothered if he endorses anybody, but he should not come and pontificate. He should not come and throw his quality, at us, while knowing that it's just being pretentious. And the fact is, we have seen governments since then. I have seen the Buhari governments that have been constrained, in terms of resources, in terms of population growth and population explosion, more or less, and have been able to deliver on infrastructural facilities. And I ask whoever champions the Obasanjo brand to come forward and say that during the Obasanjo period, so many kilometers of road were constructed. During the Obasanjo years, so many we openly. By the time General Obasanjo came into office, 90% of our total revenue earnings, was from crude oil. By the time he was leaving, it was still in that same range, which means he was not able to diversify our revenue base, or what we call the earning, the income base, as it were. So we were merely fixated on crude oil. And yes, we had good crude oil prices at that time, so much that,
Many have also said that Nigeria's democracy has gone beyond a stage where one person can single-handedly determine who becomes the leader. Now, in this view, what effect can his action have on the process and final outcome of the election?
No, I don't think an Obasanjo endorsement carries weight, and many people who are involved in politics would agree with that, because if you look at his antecedents, politically speaking, it's actually a paperweight, given his returns from even his own polling units. He lost his polling units in 1999 as a presidential candidate of the PDP. In 2003, because of course there was that Yoruba nationalism and sentiments, that was the polling unit was restored to him. He won, but by 2007, he lost again, and he had been losing his polling unit. He won it in 2015, and in 2019 he lost it because he's not people oriented. He can stay he can stay far from the people. He can bear the brand of a former president, but he is not an inclusive-minded politician. He's not even a politician. And I thought he was going to be sincere with himself recently in 2022, when politicians were approaching him. PDP delegates met him, and he said he was no longer interested in politics. He was no longer interested in talking about political activities and all that. And I thought, well, perhaps the old man had actually evolved truly into a statesman. I know that the APC, there was a delegation to him from the APC out of courtesy, because you don't go to a state where a former president or head of state is domiciled without going to visit him as part of protocol, and the courtesy of protocol, as we call it, And of course, he also said he had nothing to do with politics. And all of a sudden, you see this abrasive kind of endorsement where he's coming to the arena, as it were. So I mean, where he's coming to the arena, as it were. And I'm saying, no, it's not appropriate. You don't even have a primary constituency you can call your own. If you had such, one wouldn't have been. Well, perhaps one would have said, okay, this is a weight that has spoken, and he has thrown his weight behind this person, and therefore it would have effect. I don't think it would have any effect. My personal grasp with him is that he lacks a claim, to being proficiency. I mean, to being proficient, to call himself a person of capacity and capability in government. And therefore he should not use that, to hoodwink Nigerians. That's my personal grasp with him. Let him support anybody he wants to. When February 25 is here, all the issues will be clear within those 24 hours.
All right, then. Mr. Akinsiju, we still have a lot to discuss on this particular issue, but then that will be right after this break. Please stay with us. Don't go away.
All right.
So, all in favor, say aye. Those against, no.
Its role in governance, and as one of the three arms of government, Lagos Parliament is here to bring it to you as it is. Here to bring you every detail you need to know about the legislature in Africa's most populous city. On Lagos Parliament, to get a chance to meet the lawmaker of the week. Events are critically reviewed. You can also observe plenary in Yoruba language. I am Abimbola Agbebi. Join me every Friday at 9 p.m. as I take you through the activities of the legislature.
Welcome back to Politics Tonight, and I still have with me public affairs analyst Niyi Akinsiju. We've been talking about former President Olusegun Obasanjo's endorsement of the presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi. All right, let's go on now. Obasanjo's endorsement of Obi has opened a floodgate of reactions from different quarters, and also many have said, why not take the message and leave out the messenger?
The value of a message is inherent in the messenger. If the messenger does not have a history of a precedence of truthfulness, it will reflect on his message. So, and I think that is why these reactions, had visited that endorsement. And like I said, for me, I don't have any problem with that endorsement, but I have a problem with the messenger, because the messenger and the way he had captured and packaged that message has been wrongfully, delivered in the public space, because he is not qualified in the true sense of it, to deliver that kind of message. When you deliver that kind of message, it will mean that perhaps when you were in office as a former president, you delivered on the promises you made fully, and it was impactful on Nigerians. A major policy deficiency, that I always referenced during the Obasanjo era, was the National Poverty Eradication Program. That was a very deficient, narrow, single-track policy. And to think that you even had individuals from the World Bank, etc., in that government, and you now deliver that kind of program to salvage the largely poor jurisdiction that Nigeria was at that time. It shows that the presidency at that time was a president that lacks the bigger picture, that lacks an understanding of the bigger picture. So at the end of it, we had a country made up of Okada riders and Keke Napep riders. And it does not in any way, address the issues of institutionalized poverty in Nigeria. So it talks to the kind of president we had at that time. And of course, at the beginning of his term, he apparently embraced globalization. Well, there is no problem in globalization if your economy was strong enough or had potential to be strong enough. But again, perhaps he had a lot of professors talk that many industries shut down. The textile industry in Nigeria had become comatose, and textile industry was a major employer of labor back in the days. And you don't open it up because it was still an infant industry. Again, during that period, we had challenges of power, challenges of foreign exchange, etc., etc. But you open it up, and of course, foreign products ran down, outbidded the textile industry. And today, we had most of the issues we have in unemployment had roots in those things.
All right, we have seen, some governors talking about Governor Otom of Benue State and elder statesman Edwin Clark, who have shown support in endorsing Obi. In your view, are we likely to see more?
Oh, well, it is an open space. Governor Otom is a politician. He has a right to endorse anybody he wants. I don't have any problem. I mean, other people have been endorsing other people too. Several big names, accomplished human beings, have endorsed Asiwaju Ahmed Tinubu, Bola Ahmed Tinubu. I've seen some other people endorse Waziri Adamawa, Atiku Abubakar. I've seen some other people endorse the Kwankwaso from Kano. So yes, it's a tradition, it's a culture in politics. But again, it also comes with its own responsibilities. So when you are endorsing somebody, you are putting the weight of your personality and brand behind that person. And of course, your brand must be seen as that brand. And that's why there's a big question around General Obasanjo. What kind of brand are we talking about? Is it a brand that has shown effectiveness, that has shown accomplishments in leadership? I am saying no, it has not. And so we can question it, we can query it, and that's what we are doing now.
All right. Now that you've mentioned some of these frontline presidential candidates, how do you think this will affect the chances of these people, talking about Atiku or Tinubu?
I don't think so. It's one, politics is local. The eventual winner of this contest will be the one that has the most numbers of local champions, local influencers that are relating with the people at the grassroots. Because if politics is about numbers, and President Muhammadu Buhari had assured us that the votes of every Nigerian would count now, it will translate to mean that it's those people at the polling unit level, not even at the ward level. It's those people that have shown responsibility, at the ward, on their streets, that have leadership quality in their neighborhood, that have followership, in their area. Those are the people that determine who gets to win election. It's all those big names. And of course, you also now have an amalgamation of all these smaller leaders in neighbors, in wards, in different areas that can now also come together and become a conglomerate of leaders, and it's a party that's able to wield the bigger numbers of this kind of amalgam, that gets to win eventually. So it's not somebody writing a letter, that will determine where Nigerians will go. What's that letter that made us do is to provide a lot of debate, around the person and his intent, as it were. And that is what we are doing now. It does not translate to votes because the people who will vote on that day, either they have made up their mind or they will depend on a number of other influencers in their areas to tell them what to do, because that is actually politics, that is democracy. And you also have people at the grassroots look up for to engage them and enlighten them on the political direction. That's how politics is run.
All right. Now, let's look at some points former President Obasanjo made in that letter, which sounds very important to him. He said Obi is a needle with thread attached to it, hence he may not get lost. And many have translated this to mean that former President Obasanjo may be looking for a way to play the role of a political godfather to control a sitting president. How will you react to this?
Of course, that has been his aspiration. I think it's a first part. It's an unintentional addition to that letter, because ordinarily it should not be that. It should not be part of that letter. It talks clearly to the fact that Obi is someone that he can control his mind and heart. And don't forget that after he left office, he was very, very involved in the campaign for his successor, and of course, by the time the late Yar'Adua emerged, 3 or 4 months thereafter, there was a conflict, because it was obvious General Obasanjo was becoming a kind of a pressure point on that government, and there was conflict. Yes, and he was also very supportive of the successor to Yar'Adua, Dr. Goodluck Jonathan. Again, a few months after that, there was also a conflict, because he was there. He was always, in the villa, and there was a conflict. Again, in 2015, between 2015 and 2016, when General Buhari won the elections, every other week, General Obasanjo was there. And I have it on authority, that he was actually stopped from coming to the villa because the villa people told him that he was distracting the president, and he was discouraged. So I think he wants somebody in office that he would be able to control his mind and thought, and perhaps be the de facto president, where he's concerned. So I think that's where he wants to place an Obi. And well, I don't know if that one is, even if that one even have the capacity to win the election, as it were. But the truth of the matter is, the major aspiration for Obasanjo is to, as much as possible, see if he can have dominating influence on the presidency.
All right. Well, consider the fact that you've said that you do not have an issue with the message, but then the messenger. But some Nigerians also say, this is like Obasanjo correcting past mistakes, especially regarding Southeast presidency. Do you support this assertion?
Oh, well, I don't know if he didn't say that. If people are making insinuation to that effect, well, it's everybody has his or her opinion on this matter, talking about equity, justice, and all that. And there are, of course, different ways to look at it. Some people that said the issue for us is where the presidency goes to, either the north or the south. Now we have seen a situation really where most political actors in the southeast had actually abandoned the agenda for a southern presidency. That is the irony. It's a paradox. Paradox to the extent that before now, political activities were unbanned, so to speak, there was that general conviviality amongst governors, we're using them as a reference point, amongst governors of the PDP and APC in the southern part of Nigeria, where clear declarations were made, with signed documents and all that, to insist that the presidency must rotate to the south, and well, eventually by the time primaries came up, most of those actors who were signing these documents abandoned the agenda, as it were. So it's the people that have the heart that will have to stand and, of course, advance that agenda. I see Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu emerging from the south, specifically from the southwest. One would have thought that perhaps another candidate of the PDP, where the PDP had been the southeast, and the southeast specifically had been the bulwark for the PDP over time, and you expect that there will be a concession to the southeast. PDP as a political giant in PDP in the southeast have not been pushing this agenda, have not even created any form of advocacy around it, perhaps with the exception of the integrity group led by a person, an individual from a governor from the south, and of course you have the governor of Enugu and the governor of Abia State in that group. All other members of that group from the southeast have not been pushing the agenda, have not been advocating around it. Oh. So for me, if Obasanjo thinks that this is what he wants to correct, I don't know, because even from the base itself, from the southeastern base itself, there's lukewarm, in terms of support for that agenda.
All right, let's quickly talk about the chances of Peter Obi in the election. His popularity has been on the rise, and now he has this endorsement. How will you rate his chances of winning?
I think we should first discount this endorsement, really, because, some of us have also been following politics for over many years. So we understand what are the issues, that would be impactful when they are talking politics. It's definitely not endorsement. It is adoption. When a political group wants to work with you, it adopts you. And every rank and file member of that group you become the candidate of every rank and file member of that group. And they in turn endorse you by also going into the field to start campaigning, to start marketing you. It's different from somebody, one assumed big man, saying that I have endorsed this person. How many followers, active followers, does that person have, so that they would now adopt? It is a matter of adoption. So talking about Obi, the first thing you want to start saying as and I'm talking objectively here, how many gubernatorial candidates do you have in the Labour Party? How many House of Representative candidates do you have in the Labour Party across the country? How many senatorial candidates do you have in the Labour Party across the country? How many House of Assembly candidates do you have in the Labour Party across the country? If you do a calculation, it cannot be up to 50% of the whole grid, as it were. So, and don't forget, those who say politics is local, the implication is that it is the person with foot on ground at the level of the polling, the level of zones within the ward, at the level of the ward, at the level of the local government. Those are the people that determine who wins. So if you don't have a member of the House of Assembly, for instance, who is also campaigning, for himself on the platform of his party, and by extension also campaigning for all other candidates on the platform of his party, how do you now sell such a person that does not have that kind of representation at the grassroots level? So it's a major minus, for Mr. Peter Obi. But again, the courage of coming out, the availability, making himself available as a choice, in this election is impressive, and I commend him for that.
All right. Now, on a broader level now, I would like to ask you, do you in any way see this election as perhaps, one that could lead to the emergence of the so-called third force that some Nigerians have been clamoring for?
Well, third force, third force don't happen. If you look at the history of third force, it is actually a history of momentum. It's generated over time, and it is generated around an idea or a philosophy that grow over time. It's not a 100-meter dash. It's not a sudden thing. So when you're talking of third force, it must also be properly nurtured. It must be properly accepted and imbibed by the voting public. So to a large extent, I don't see any third force here. Yes, we know that the APC and the PDP have more or less have strong grounds in terms of their political development. The APC is relatively new. It's a party that was formed in 2013 and registered in 2014, compared to PDP. So, and to a large extent, perhaps they've had a philosophy that has been sold to Nigerians. Now you now have a marginal peripheral group of people that also want to sell the OB philosophy, as it were. So I think it's a growing philosophy. Perhaps if it's consistent and if the character, in the movement shows consistency and shows transparency, not a situation where you have the Labour Party DG, the Presidential Campaign Council DG, being convicted by a court. Now when you said that kind of movement to me, the first thing that comes to my mind is that these people are not yet in office. They've started cavorting more or less with a criminal, because by the conviction, it shows that the DG of the Presidential Campaign Council is actually a criminal. So how do you want to say it is different from whatever we have as the followers or supporters of Mr. Obi who want to claim?
All right. Thank you very much. I've been speaking with the public affairs analyst, Mr. Niyi Akinsiju. Thank you for coming on Politics Tonight as we critically look at former President Olusegun Obasanjo's endorsement of the Labour Party presidential candidate, Peter Obi, and other issues that may shape the outcome of the 2023 election. Thank you very much for coming on Politics Tonight.
It's a privilege. Thank you for having me.
All right, and thank you very much for watching. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight, but the conversation continues from here. Get in touch with us, Politics Tonight. We are also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. Join us for the repeat episode at midnight and tomorrow for another edition of Politics Tonight, digging beyond the headlines. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Goodbye.